Hello everyone, welcome to another video here on the channel. Today's topic is the biological game of female hypergamy. Now, hypergamy. I am sure most of you are familiar with this term, but just in case someone new happens to stumble upon the channel, let me explain. Hypergamy is an instinct, a deeply ingrained biological condition found in women. But what exactly does that mean? What does this instinctive condition entail? It is a woman's natural biological ability to be drawn to the most remarkable males, those with the most abundant resources. This phenomenon is observable in nature, particularly among mammals. It's not merely a social construct, as some might think, nor is it about making judgments like claiming that women are self-interested or attributing it to machismo or patriarchy. None of those things. The human species has been operating in this manner for about 7 million years or so. Men possess a natural instinct for polygamy, where they desire to have numerous partners to ensure the continuation of their gender. On the other hand, women, due to the inherent vulnerability that comes with pregnancy, biologically speaking, even if they lack a desire to become mothers or feel no particular affinity with the experience of motherhood, whether we like it or not, nature has inherently programmed women for a state of hypergamy. This means they have a biological inclination to seek a male partner who can offer protection, security, and resources. These needs are crucial to ensure that their children are born healthy and raised in a safe and secure environment. Even though women today are often independent and capable of earning their own money and managing everything, this fundamental aspect hasn't really changed. So contrary to popular belief, this isn't just about social constructs or a deconstruction of society, as is often discussed in modern times. It's actually a deeply rooted biological condition. Now, I'm not creating this video to give a lecture on biology. Instead, this is meant for us to explore and understand the phenomena that tend to intensify and trigger these inherent instincts. Because if you consider something instinctual, something more primal about our species, that isn't connected to the psyche or spirituality, but rather to the more primal, animalistic side of the human being. And when you manage through various mechanisms, stimuli, rewards, and so forth, to cause an imbalance in this aspect, you end up with the society that is on the brink of collapse. For instance, let's consider another basic human biological instinct, which is the instinct for food. So, throughout the vast majority of our existence here on Earth, we have been hunters and gatherers, isn't that right? You didn't have supermarkets or e-food, none of those conveniences, right? So scarcity was always the norm, wasn't it? Then, after the Paleolithic era, the Conilithic period came along with it, agriculture and all that, allowing for mass production, right? But then people's health began to decline too, didn't it? This was due to the excessive consumption of grains and seeds. But that's a topic for another discussion. What has occurred is that there has been a significant rise in obesity, a growing number of diabetic individuals, and people suffering from metabolic syndrome, among other health issues. This situation arose due to an excess, a surplus of food, at least in many countries. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that there are still over 1 billion people worldwide who experience hunger. However, particularly in the Western world, as well as in some Asian nations that have achieved greater wealth, and in Oceania, there has been a general trend of having an overabundance of food available. An excess of food, of sugar, which stimulates a primitive instinct of the human being, which is food with highly addictive foods, especially carbohydrates, to which you cause an imbalance that these foods have not been part of the human diet for a long time. Soon you will have an epidemic of obese and diabetic people. To provide another example, consider men's natural inclination towards polygamy. Something that has significantly affected men's minds is pornography, particularly internet pornography. The kind of pornography found in magazines during the 70s, 80s, and 90s was not as harmful. With the advent of high-speed internet, a person can view more images of naked women in just 20 minutes of browsing through tabs than their ancestors might have seen over the course of 5 or even 10 lifetimes. This quite clearly leads to an imbalance where the man becomes increasingly detached from reality. When it comes to women, this issue of hypergamy is significant. If you disrupt it in society, you risk reverting to a more primitive era, almost like the Stone Age, where only the strongest individuals, those with the most resources, would have the opportunity to pass on their genes. As soon as you disrupt female playfulness, you see with things like novels or movies like 50 Shades of Grey, for instance, or with Hollywood's portrayal of excessively perfect lives and all those other elements, it becomes problematic, don't you think? But before the internet and social media, like Instagram, society had moral restraints on men's polygamy and women's hypergamy. Until the 1950s in the US, only 6% of women ended life unmarried, according to an American census study. Today, we already have a forecast for the United States, Brazil, and the West projecting into the upcoming 30s that we will have more than 40% of women being single. So why is this occurring? From the time you promote access, in this particular case, the prominence of a small fraction of men, which in Brazil is between 1 to 5%, it's not 80 minus 20 as some people claim. It never was, considering Brazil is a country with limited resources. Therefore, here in Brazil, you promote the idea that only 1 to 5% of men are deemed interesting. Women, they won't have the ability to connect or relate to other people. In this situation, when there is an overabundance of dopamine, such as through Instagram, with its depiction of perfect lives, wonderful marriages, and everything else, you're essentially taking a 7-million-year-old instinct inherent in females and presenting her with the idea that 90 to 95% of men, or even 99% of men, in some instances, are not deserving of her. You don't deserve them, you have to hope for the best, you need someone to provide security, and so on and so forth. Sometimes they might not speak so directly like this, because it would imply a certain submissiveness, a certain obvious self-interest. And we understand that in a society striving for political correctness, this type of verbal game is often played with more subtle and softer nuances. So, from the moment you step away from this sphere where the most prominent men in society are seen only on gossip shows, in a global soap opera, in a movie, or in a book, and you move to something where there is daily exposure such, as with the Instagram stories feature, you're like, because if you think about it, when the movie Titanic was released, back in 1997, women saw Leonardo DiCaprio and all that, as he was considered one of the biggest hunks of all time, and it remains significant. It's truly an epoch-making film and all that. You also had actors like Brad Pitt, and in Brazil, Reinaldo Giannichini. However, that alone wasn't sufficient for a woman, for instance, to cease viewing her husband as an interesting individual. Back then, it wasn't sufficient for just one woman to desire a man from that side. Women's standards hadn't yet soared to the stratospheric levels they have today. That's how men perceived it too, anti-sorceress, Paniquete during the of Panic on TV, remember? So it was that more pastel, it's more about entertainment, right? You couldn't really label it as brain destroying and all those things. No one's discussing morals here, all right? I always mention in my videos that we don't make moral judgments. We look at things from a biological, social, and anthropological angle, okay? So what you see is a shift from the hypergamy of artists, singers, athletes, and super celebrities worldwide, including some politicians, to sub-celebrities. Now, you can observe what wealthy individuals in your area are doing, where they travel, and learn about their lifestyles. Before this shift, you didn't know what the rich man or woman in your town did during their vacations, what they ate for breakfast, which gym they worked out at, or who visited their home. With this hypergamy, I believe Instagram stories changed everything when they adopted Snapchat's story feature. It went off the rails. Before, with just photos, women weren't as aware of others' lives. Now, millions of women in Brazil know all about the lives of 100, 200, even 500 guys on Instagram who are the super alphas in the spotlight. Some are celebrity doctors, others are super heirs, soccer players, and a few who have managed to become very wealthy, heavily relying on the internet, right? When I say become wealthy, I mean earning $500,000, $1 million a month, or even more, okay? Not those who make $20,000 or $30,000 a month, okay? So women started to gain access to these men's lives due to this exposure on social networks. And obviously these men aren't foolish. They do this because it allows them to attract a large harem, right? So this super eminent man, he's really focusing on polygamy to the extreme, isn't he? If he possesses some kind of benefit or advantage that attracts women, it's quite unlikely that this individual will desire monogamy anytime soon. Wouldn't you agree? And when he eventually does decide to settle down, it certainly won't be with any of those women who keep persistently chasing him on Instagram. So you witness a societal collapse from the very moment society begins to interact through stories, through reels, and these new tools, montages, and everything else that comes with them. These guys have a wealth of material, toys, video editing, travel, and a lively life which women dream of. And even though some women are able to earn their own money and achieve independence, and some even become wealthy, this instinct to always desire the best man is not abandoned just because of these achievements. Therefore, feminism makes a significant mistake when it assumes that this kind of analysis is only conducted to suggest that women need men for their support. No, it's a deep-seated ancestral desire to be close to someone, right? So for instance, a woman can earn as much as she desires, she can be incredibly successful, yet she'll still seek a man who is exceptional. However, it's a situation where many women are pursuing just a few exceptional men. So it doesn't really add up, does it? And it's amusing because if you think about it, 7 million years of evolution have led to the creation of an app from California that simply mocks biology. Within a span of just 5 to 10 years, a cell phone application has emerged that successfully takes a primitive instinct and elevates it to levels unseen before by any other mammalian species in nature. This results in a situation where a very limited number of men gain access to an enormous multitude of women. Consequently, female hypergamy has become an unstoppable force. It has soared to astronomical heights, reaching the moon, where women who are rated as a 5 are seeking men who are rated as a 10. So this is clearly going to lead to a breakdown in social security, civilization, and mental health. You can observe women taking antidepressants and anxiolytics, and it's exactly because they are constantly searching for the perfect man. But it's not only due to that. You have an entire society where that's one of the primary reasons. Additionally, there is the problem of long and exhausting working hours, inflation, economic stagnation, and all the other factors, including the internal competitiveness among them. So to wrap up this video here, if you don't quite get it, first of all, hypergamy isn't about women being characterless, self-interested, or promiscuous. It's actually a biological condition. Secondly, you have platforms like Instagram that have really complicated this issue in a sense. It's like social engineering on a Pavlovian scale, you know, the whole stimulus and reward system that Pavlov worked on with dogs. So there's a massive level of social engineering involved in this, right? Third, men benefiting from this won't change. Women will lower standards in 3 cases. 2 are utopian, 1 likely. First, if everyone on Instagram vanished, that's not happening. Second, if a conservative Judeo-Christian society returned, it's another utopia, and I'm sorry, but anyone who's conservative believes in it. The third scenario, which occurs in reality but doesn't solve the problem, is when men eventually wake up. And when they do, they won't be satisfied, especially after they go over the 30 wall. The famous post-wall, which Attitude Alpha always talks about, Miguel. So when women pass the 30%, they see that their sexual market value has plummeted, some with very good genetics in the 35, but the rule is the 30%. Then they start wanting to accept more average guys at the 10% level, or even guys who are there in the 10-15% of the top. But since they want 1 or 2% of the top, they end up accepting the upper middle class guys. Let's put it that way. But what you're not mentioning is that men are awakening in a widespread manner. As a result, this decrease in their late hypergamy often doesn't succeed. You'll notice more and more women being left behind. This is exactly because they've allowed themselves to be swept away by getting caught in this modern technological trap of Instagram, which has taken their basic instincts, confused them, and elevated them to astronomical levels, like reaching the moon, right? So don't attempt to combat hypergamy, alright? Because in addition to being a biological instinct, today's game is just unplayable, and there's no way to fight the damage. Now, I'm blending the idea of damage with Instagram here, right? This is an uncut video, that's what we're doing, guys. So there's really no point in trying to combat the damage that Instagram has inflicted on society. Therefore, the advice I offer you is quite simple. Don't resist, and don't attempt to dream of a conservative society. Instead, focus on observing the chaos of these past 20 years and strive to be in the best possible position, which is always centered on personal development. Bye, see you later.